Hello everyone, I'm Matthew, the author of the Undo Meditation and Life Navigation app, and today I'm here to talk to you on the next part of our series on meditation, on natural meditation. And today's title is thinking about breathing really meditation? So today my aim is to simplify any confusion or struggle that people are having with meditation. That's whether they've just begun to meditate or not yet begun, but also for those of you who've been meditating for a lifetime or for even decades. Because one of the occurrences that have happened with meditation through years and decades of people inventing different approaches to meditation is it's become a thought-based process and become a goal-orientated process. And this is what's making meditation complicated and actually quite ineffective in our day-to-day life. And it's not difficult to understand why we as a human species have messed this up in the way we have. From very early in our life, when we learn to interact with our parents and people around us, we're encouraged to use thinking in virtually every aspect of our life. And we're very much encouraged from an early age to form our identity and our idea of ourselves through talking and thinking. And talking and thinking is the interaction that we have between one another, from a child to a parent and so on. But talking and thinking we also do within ourselves. We think and talk to ourselves in our own thinking processes. So throughout our life, we've been in every way, in every area of our life, in our education, in interaction with our family, and as we've grown up through school and so forth, we're heavily encouraged and focused on thinking, on talking about ourselves and on thinking about ourselves. As I said before, from an early age, our parents are saying funny little quirky things to us to encourage us to think about ourselves in a certain way, like, oh, isn't she a pretty little girl? And so on. Things that we wouldn't naturally consider as a 3 or 4 year old girl or boy is whether I'm pretty or not. We don't care. But our parents care. And so our parents and people around us entertain themselves by imposing their ideals and what they think is important on us through the way they make comments to us, the way they interact with us through talking. And in this way we learn to mimic in our own thinking what other people have said to us about ourselves. And in this way, through this form of interacting, we're encouraged to think about ourselves, to form ideas and impressions of ourselves. And in forming ideas and impressions of ourselves, this becomes a problem as we go on through life. In fact, it's become, I would say, the major problem for each and every human being. And that is thinking about yourself. People find themselves thinking about themselves a lot of the time, if not all of the time. And in thinking about ourselves, we're continually reinforcing ideas about ourselves that we've learnt from other people along the way. And in thinking about ourselves, we're not really thinking about ourselves, but we're thinking about the thoughts that others have taught us to think about ourselves. And we learn to think about ourselves in ways that society and culture can approve of, and therefore, being so heavily conditioned by society and culture, we learn to think about ourselves in ways that we can approve of, or alternatively, that we can disapprove of. And then out of all this thinking about ourselves, we create such a insecurity about ourselves that we find ourselves then thinking about what other people might be thinking about us. And in our life, we find ourselves worried about what other people think of us. And this is just an extension of worrying about ourselves, of having learned to think about ourselves in such ways that have taken us far away from the sensory living experience of ourselves into worrying and thinking and, in a sense, obsessing about ourselves on an ongoing basis. And this projecting into the world around us and onto our friends or people we know leaves us quite enslaved to what other people think of us and quite worried from time to time, if not a lot of the time, about what other people think of us and how we're appearing in the eyes of others. The only reason we are thinking in this way is because throughout our whole life we've been encouraged from as soon as we began to interact with our parents, we've been encouraged to think about ourselves and to think our way through life, to use thinking to solve our problems, to use thinking to improve upon ourselves, to use thinking to add things to ourselves. And essentially, from the very beginning, all thinking has really done, and all ideas about ourselves or things we've learnt have really done, is add something to what we naturally are. Not necessarily add something that's beneficial, but add ideas and abilities, mechanical abilities for life, to what we naturally are as a living organism. So consequently, it rarely, I should say, occurs to an individual that there is another way to operate. And so as we grow older and as a species, as we've developed, we've tried to use thinking to resolve what we consider to be our problems, whether they be our health problems, our physical problems, our psychological problems, our problems of identity, our personal problems is what I'm really saying. We've tried to use thinking to resolve our personal problems, and in doing so we've come up with all sorts of ideologies, all sorts of psychologies, all sorts of theories and practices, and all sorts of healing practices which are all thought-based and created from our thinking in order to try and resolve the problems of our personal, physical and psychological issues. So all of this, so far, we can see that we've overrun the natural state of ourselves and ruled the natural state of ourselves and lost sight of the natural state of how we function by overusing thinking, in thinking about ourselves and our life to do everything we want to do, to achieve everything we want to achieve. So consequently, it's the rare human being that ever stumbles upon the fact that there is another way to exist, there's another way to operate. And with all of this heavy conditioning through our life and this one way of doing things, which is always through thinking, as this is developed, even in the approach to understanding the true nature of ourselves and to reacquaint ourselves with ourselves in order to fully understand and enlighten ourselves to ourselves, we have continued to try and apply thinking in an attempt to achieve this. So we've continued to try and apply thinking in an attempt to understand and fathom something that actually exists beneath the shallow surface of our thinking and can only be known deeper and understood deeper in the sensory experience of the natural body that we are, of the natural human that we are. And the natural human is not the human we think ourselves to be. This is not what we naturally are. This is what we've made up. But beneath what we think ourselves to be and beneath what we've conditioned ourselves to be is what we really are. And we can't really know that through thinking. You can't know how you feel by thinking about it. These are two different worlds entirely. Thinking is a description of what you are at the very most, whereas what you are can't really be captured, and the experience of what you are can never be captured, and therefore experientially and truly understood through thinking. So if you can't experientially and truly understand what it is to be you through thinking, how on earth is thinking going to help you get to the very bottom of yourself, to the depths of yourself? The two never meet. The word sad never meets with the feeling of sadness. They're always in two different places. One is inside you as a sensation in the body, a physical sensation, and the other is on the surface or outside of you as a thought or a word. When you think about yourself, you're not actually succeeding. You think you're thinking about yourself, but in the very act of thinking about yourself, you're preventing any deeper experience of yourself as and who you and what you really are from occurring. And only by going beneath that thought process into this sensory experience, the living experience of yourself, do you ever get a taste of what it is to be you. And so the approach to meditation that we've invented has been invented by us thinking about it. So it's not working. The reason it's not working is because to be thoughtful or mindful is the word that's a bit common nowadays. Mindful, which just means thinking about something. To be mindful in something is to think about it. So for example, to be mindful of how it feels to be you is to think about how it feels to be you. And if you think about how it feels to be you, you disassociate from the feeling of it itself. For example, if you sit in a hot bath of water, in order to really experience the living experience of sitting in a hot bath of water, you have to go deeper and quieter into the sensory and living experience of you as a body immersed in hot water. And it's only through you as a body being immersed in hot water that you actually know the water's hot, that you actually know the sensation of the liquid, that you actually know, because you sense it, that you're even in a hot bath of water. And the experience of that is physical, 100% physical, a living physical phenomena. And yet, if we begin to think about something, we're sitting in the hot bath of water, and the more we think about something unrelated to that water, just start thinking away, drifting into unrelated thinking, or even thinking about the water. To the degree that we think, to that same degree, we begin to desensitize from the natural human that we are into a thought process which is unfeeling, which is without sensation, which is a dead process. And that is to think about something is purely a description. A word or a thought itself doesn't exist in its own right, but merely just is a tool that we use, or a mechanics that we use to describe what does exist. So we can describe ourselves existing in a hot bath of water, but the more we think about it, the less we experience it. And so to apply this same thing to meditation, which is to take notice of some of this strange teachings that are coming across now about meditation, where particularly I notice in the Buddhist approach to teaching one to be focusing on your breath. So what exactly does that mean, to focus on your breath? To be mindful of your breath. It means to think about it. So if I'm thinking about breathing, how can this be meditation? I'm just thinking about breathing. I'm just thinking. So then the next instruction that is given is, okay, focus on your breathing, and then if you notice yourself being distracted into other sensations in your body or sounds in the room around you, just bring your focus back to the breath. So what's being said here is that the natural sensations in your body that are inevitably going to happen, and the natural sounds in the room around you, which also are inevitably a part of the here and now, and if your existence right now, you're being instructed to shut these out and focus in on just the breath. So you're creating an unnatural forcefulness of concentration of your thinking on only one aspect of what's happening, and that is on your breath. And so while you're thinking about your breath, even the act of thinking about your breath, being mindful of your breath, causes a disassociation and a disconnect from the feeling of breathing. So when you're disconnected from the feeling you're breathing, you find yourself needing to think about it in order to imagine that you're making some form of connection with it, but you're not. You're disconnected because you're thinking about it. So another dilemma is being mindful of the moment. You can't be mindful of the moment. Mindfulness is to be thoughtful. You cannot think about the here and now. You can only sense the here and now. And after sensing the here and now, after sensing an itch on my shoulder, only then does thought describe that itch. Thought does not describe that itch at the moment that itch exists. It describes that itch just after it exists. So in other words, thinking is always memory. It's a description of the thing. It's a description of the fact. And the fact always precedes the description of itself. So you can't be mindful of the moment. You'll be always mindful of the past, but never mindful of the moment. So to be mindful of the moment is impossible. Thinking about the here and now is impossible because thinking is memory. Memory is about the immediate past. So even to be mindful of your breath or mindful of the moment, it's creating an illusion that through thinking about what exists, you can somehow interact with that. You can somehow integrate with that and be fully present in that. But this is the dilemma of trying to approach a fact of life from thoughts about life. And it's making meditation unnecessarily complicated, and actually it's not meditation at all. It's just thinking about things. Things that we don't need to think about. And why are we doing this? Because, as I said earlier, our entire life we've been taught and encouraged to think about ourselves. And so these schools of meditation have just given us different ways to think about ourselves. But this is not meditation. This is just thinking. And this will always be a struggle. So rather than focusing on your breath and ignoring the sensations in your body or the sounds in your room, in our natural state, in the natural state of the body's meditation, this other way of operating, we are sensorially connected to our immediate environment from within the living sense of ourselves in the body. So there is no separation in time, there is no separation in sensation, between breathing and thinking about breathing. Why do I need to think about breathing? I can't not breathe. I stop breathing, I'll die. I'm breathing all the time. As a body, the sensation of breathing never ends. As a body, the sensation of the temperature is never ending. So when I shift from always thinking about life to a completely new way, a completely different way of being, which we're all familiar with actually, but we overlook, and that is to simply sense life as we already do. To simply sense ourselves as we already are. Going deeper into the sensation of whatever is going on in the body and in our life around us. To simply sense that, we're sensing it through our ears, through our eyes, through our skin, through our smell, through our taste, and so on. And there is absolutely no need to describe these sensory experiences to ourselves. If we do, we only describe them after already knowing about them. So what purpose does describing them to ourselves serve? None at all. This is overthinking life. So mindfulness is a guaranteed way to never integrate and experience the moment. You're thinking about the moment, but distracted from the sensory immediacy of life happening in the here and now. Distracted from that simply into thoughts about it, even though those thoughts, of course, can only occur in the here and now because there is nowhere else. But to create this idea that I should somehow be in the here and now is to suggest there's somewhere else you can be. So through this thought-based approach to being integrated and whole and fully connected in the reality of our life as we exist and as we live it, through mindfulness is an attempt to fabricate the experience of life as it is. To try and be in the here and now when you are anyway. To concentrate on your breathing when you're fully in the sensation of it anyway, because after all, it's you who's breathing. So this is creating a problem when a problem isn't there. The problem to be focused on your breathing is simply you're thinking somehow you can't be. To consider that by only being focused on your breathing and the sensations and sounds around you are a distraction, you're teaching yourself that these other things are wrong, that I shouldn't be aware of these, I should just be focused on the breath. From the outside in, from thinking about life, we can only really focus on one thing at a time. And so this makes sense. But this is not meditation, this is thinking. Meditation is from the inside out. From the inside out, the body hears, sees, smells, tastes, feels, all at the same time. And yet all of these senses are operating without being distracted by the other senses. I can be tasting a hot cup of tea, the temperature of a hot cup of tea, yet feeling the cold air on my skin. All of my senses operate independently, yet they are a part of the whole of me operating at once. So from the physical sense and sensations that make up the living organism of me, I can be aware of everything at the same time. No one thing is a distraction from the other. I'm quite capable of looking at the camera, listening to the sound over there, feeling the temperature of my skin, sensing within myself the feelings and sensations that are occurring as I'm talking, the taste in my mouth and the smell of the air, all of these things. I'm quite capable of all of these things happening at once as a physical living organism and being receptive equally to all of these. And all of that I can do before thinking even comes into it. I don't need thinking for any of that. I can focus on talking to you, and yet all of that is going on at the same time. That is my natural meditation. And that natural meditation of the body is not at odds with anything. Thinking has got nothing to do with it. Thinking is just something that occurs to express or interact what we sense, firstly in the body. And until we sense it in the body, we have no way of knowing anything. As an example, if your leg is numb, let's say you've got a broken leg and they've used an injection to numb your leg out and you can't feel it anymore. If you can't feel the presence of your leg as a sensation, how are you going to know it's there? You don't. You have no way of knowing it's there other than looking at it or touching it with your hand. But even touching your leg with your hand, in your leg, there's no sensation. The sensation's in your hand. Your hand knows your leg's there. Your eyes know your leg is there. But your leg and you in your leg have no way of knowing its presence. So considering this, what is it that is required for us to know anything other than physical sensation? Only following that sensation do we then think about and describe what we know as a sensation. So natural meditation is not coming from the outside in, trying to apply, as we've been taught through our entire life, trying to apply ways of thinking to discover what it is and to experience what it is to be me, to be yourself as you truly are. This is not natural meditation. This is the meditations we have invented in order to try and mimic life by focusing on and thinking about life. But you can't get any depth this way. Like body scanning, which is another form of mindfulness. You can body scan, meaning you can think about parts of your body. Think about a part of your body or all parts of your body, and in thinking about it over and over again, you can become mentally aware of your body. But that's as deep as you can go with thought. You can know your body is there or think about your body, yourself sitting there. But that's as deep as you're ever going to go with thought. You can never, through thinking alone, even though you exist, you have to sense your existence from the inside of yourself, as the whole of yourself, as a physical body that you are. And this is natural meditation, absolutely natural to the body. This is an entirely different approach to life. Because with this natural meditation, you're not applying an idea on yourself to try and achieve a certain experience or result. You are simply reattuning to the experience of yourself that is already occurring naturally. So there is no effort, no struggle, and no goal. You're not trying to change the way you are from how you don't like yourself to how you do like yourself. This is also the product of superficial thinking, and this creates conflict and difficulties when you're trying to meditate or trying to live in life. But to resolve these conflicts and difficulties, we resolve these conflicts and difficulties with ourselves by going deeper than all this judgmental and critical and idealistic or goal-orientated thinking about ourselves, which we've been doing all our life, and meditation techniques is just another way of doing it, into a completely different approach to yourself and life, which is to simply notice how it feels in the body of you at any given moment. Just feeling the sense of yourself as you are, however it feels to be you, and not trying to change that, because this is not how you're going to understand yourself as you are, trying to change it or manipulating it through a technique or through thinking about it. You're going to understand yourself as you are simply by sensing it in the body. And when you sense how you feel in the body, from that sensation, you know your needs and you know how to respond to yourself. But until you do this, you don't know. So this direct and very different approach to ourselves, this natural meditation, is something that we as a body have been doing our entire lives. Every time we are distressed or unwell, we respond to that sensorially, physically, and that triggers anything that needs to happen within the intelligence and the natural function of the body to heal itself and recover. This is not something we do through thinking about ourselves from the outside. This is something that occurs beyond our thought's capacity to even comprehend and understand, and definitely thought can never duplicate what only the body can do to heal itself. We can cut ourselves and sew it up, but we can't make that wound mend. That is something that happens beyond the comprehension of thinking. It is something that happens from the inside out, a natural response to ourselves as a living, breathing, thinking organism. So this approach to ourselves is entirely different to the one that we've been geared and conditioned to from the day we began to talk and think about ourselves, and entirely different to any traditional invention and attempt to duplicate the natural occurrences of the living organism, of the life that we naturally are, through some superficial, thought-based meditation technique. You'll never get any depth in your meditation through using a technique, because a technique is disconnected from that which it is focused on. To be focused on something, you are separate to it. To focus on your breathing is to think about it as though you're separate to your breathing. To breathe, you are not thinking about it. You have no choice other than to experience this phenomena of the body. And this goes for absolutely every sensation of the body. By thinking about these sensations, we are in the thought process once removed from the sensation itself, and therefore shallow. Once we are interconnected with the sense of ourself as we are, which is really merely a matter of realizing that we always are, and we simply distract ourselves into overthinking and forget that we're feeling. So all meditation is, in the natural approach to meditation, is not thinking about the breath. This is not meditation, this is thinking. You're not distracted by anything in natural meditation. Staying deeper in the physical sense of yourself, whatever goes on there, you are fully capable of all of your sense organs functioning at the same time, without any one of them being a distraction from the other. All accumulating into a felt sense that permeates your entire body, into a sense of what it feels like to be you. And in feeling that, you are approaching yourself from a very different perspective. Not the way you've been trained, which is to try and add something to yourself and improve on yourself. No, but a completely upside down way to that, which is to come from the inside out rather than the outside in, rather than adding something to yourself. Just to experience yourself as you are and let that experience of yourself as you are process and function in its own way. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next time.